I mean, the nicest possible way, Guide M is a result of a huge amount of work, and some people may say even a little frustration, by lots of people. But actually, I'm really pleased that we're launching Guide M tonight in what I would describe as a very prestigious location, the home of the engineering professions in the Royal Academy. And I'm really pleased also that it's bridging a very important gap in many ways, and that's with the Trade Association and particularly BNES. Because I think that as professional engineers, embracing all of the various elements that actually take buildings and make them perform as they were designed and constructed for, if we don't grasp that nettle, I'll use the words advisedly, if we don't grasp that nettle, actually other people will come along and do it. And I think as engineers we have a responsibility not only to design and build them, but also to make sure that buildings are operated properly to benefit those people who occupy them in comfort. And that's actually what I think that CIBSE in many ways is all about. I also need to say thank you to the CIBSE patrons, and if you're a corporate member and not a member of CIBSE patrons, then please consider. And David, thank you very much to you and your committee and the members. I think David's paid for the drinks, so there can't be better than that afterwards in the pub. No. And the other thing this is one very small advert. All of you CIBSE members know that the knowledge portal is one of the best benefits, other than the people, of joining CIBSE. And Guide M, of course, is incredibly good value. But if you're a CIBSE member, you can download it and explore about 350 other very important publications, but not as important as Guide M this evening, free. So that's a really good reason to join CIBSE if you're not already, because you can get the knowledge portal and as well as our fantastic journal. Anyway, enough of the adverts. I'm delighted that Mike McClusker from BNES is going to follow me, and we look forward to a fantastic night, I hope, of celebration of engineering and facilities management. Thank you.
Follow that. I think I would like to start off with a little bit of history. The HVCA as it was then, BNES as it is now, started down the road of maintenance and a specification. And with great cooperation across a wide network of people, including CIBSE, we published in 1990 the first document, and the next year we published the rest of the set. I was chairman of that group that brought that publication forward. The reason I was chosen was because I was a cynic. I did not believe that we'd be able to get something that was agreeable across a wide range of different expectations, and that would be acceptable going forward. We did that. It was maybe a little bit of a lowest common denominator, but since that time things have moved on. Not only have buildings become more complicated, but we have wised up, and I think this document is a fantastic, exciting document to take the whole thing forward. Now, in BNES, we have got SFG20, which has been updated recently, is now on the web, and that incorporates, and there's been a lot of work going behind that in getting commonality through the terminology, which was a massive job. We're linked in to the rules of measurement with the RCIS. These things are huge steps, and we have this all brought together in this document to take us forward. And I only hope that the owners and the operators and developers of new buildings insist on this being part of their ongoing programme. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's David Fitzpatrick. I'm chairman of CIBSE Patrons, and I just want to explain why we wanted to sponsor this evening. Our industry must manufacture better products. We must design and install better projects, so we look at the long term instead of just looking at the handover date. This has recently been highlighted in the Channel 4 Dispatches programme, where they looked at a major development which went on in Birmingham, and what they found was all the products which are in there, you weren't able to maintain them. And this had a huge effect on the health and safety and also the energy use in that building. Facility management have been talking about this for years. I should say, Geoff has been talking about this for years and years. And as patrons are a group of manufacturers, designers and installers, we're very proud to be part of this. But we also must go out into the industry and actually promote this document and make everybody aware about it. Because this isn't a facility management issue, this is an industry issue. And I think this document actually starts to give a fantastic guide for where the industry is going to go, and it will lead to better buildings in the future. So that's why patrons were very keen to sponsor today. Can I now pass you over to John, who's going to talk a little bit more detail about it.
I'm not going to talk too much about the document itself, because the job I was asked to do was to try and tell you a bit about the history of what's gone before to get us to the point we're in at the moment. About 30 years ago, a group of what I called like-minded individuals formed what we called then the Maintenance Task Group. And if I put a little bit of context around there, that a task group, I've been told many times within CIBSE, is set up for a very short period to address a particular problem, except for this task group, which has been ongoing now for about 30 years. The thought that we were trying to achieve was to provide guidance and management on building services maintenance. And as we quoted in one of the early documents, a topic which little information had previously been available. Well, it took from the start of that group coming together several years to produce Technical Memorandum 17 on Building Services Maintenance Management in 1990. We had an interesting comment in the preface of that maintenance is all too often ignored with unfortunate economic consequences, including subsequent greater expenditure. A message that we have, I think, been trying to get across to the design fraternity for some time. He went on to note that those responsible for managing maintenance of buildings and their engineering services need both management ability and technical expertise. Going back to what Mike McCloskey just said, and I thought he's stealing my thunder here, but the task group engaged when Mike was chairing the SFG working party with what was HVCA, now and B and ES, to discuss how we could work together. I said here there was some dispute at the time as to whether CIBSE had a role, or IHVE as it was at the time had a role, with the experts in maintenance of buildings, which were HVCA's take on it. There was a little bit of friction, but we eventually resolved this by IHVE producing their best practice guides and HVCA producing their best practice guides, and CIBSE IHVE as it was setting out a best practice guide, which this is moved into now Guide M. In 1994, we had a second edition of TM17, considerably extended on the first version 4 years previously. And the interesting point when I looked through it, it was the first mention, so this is 1994, of this little-known term, facilities management. And it was also an introduction to the ideas that we could use computers in maintenance. And those two things, I think, have, when you think 20 years on where we are with the recognition of facilities management, the king of facilities management, Geoff. If I don't say it, he'll be upset. 2000, 6 years further on, the TaskGroup produced a much enlarged book called The Guide to Ownership and Operation of Building Services, known colloquially, at least within CIBSE, as the Guide. A little story about that. There was some apprehension within the publishing team at CIBSE. Would anything with maintenance actually sell? Would they be able to generate enough interest to support the significant cost of producing it? I think the run-off was 1,000 copies, and it was sold within about a week, and suddenly we realised that we had achieved something. It was a market that was just waiting to be satisfied. So 8 years later, the next edition was due, and suddenly the maintenance task group, the idea of maintenance within CIBSE took a huge leap forward. We were offered the chance to make it a guide, one of the real recognised Bibles within CIBSE. And by magic, the letter M was available, so it's Guide M. Just pure coincidence. So I say that the term maintenance is a suggestion of a second-class role. I think it's kept an awful lot of this industry moving very nicely through the recession at the moment. For possibly too long, it's been a Cinderella. That it doesn't have the challenge, the vigour, the creative design process, but it's maintenance that is responsible for ensuring the buildings we construct are kept safe, secure, environmentally friendly, healthy for the occupants, energy efficient, and affordable and fit for purpose. So that's the story, briefly, of where we started and where we are now. And I can now pass over to Jo Harris, who has been diligently chair of our maintenance task group for some time, and let her tell you a little bit about the document.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, so yes, John gave me the chairmanship, if you like, of the task group, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And the Guide M came up for a revision, and we said, yep, we can do this as a committee. We are interested, and we will get it done. So my day job is working for BSRIA. So I was managing to bring that side of the industry together as well. So lots of work with BNES, RICS, BSRIA, all the people that produce publications around this subject, and we've all collaborated. So a good step forward as far as we're all concerned. So just talk you through very quickly what this guide is about. It's about how to operate and maintain, basically. We set out in there what the designer and contractor's role are. It's about providing good installations, it's about economic to maintain, the delivery, and then we talk about the maintainer's role throughout it. You know, we're talking about this health and safety environment that John mentioned. So in the Guide M, for the designers, we're talking about safety. You know, it's one of the tasks to deliver safe buildings for us, but also how to operate it. That's an important part from us. You know, often we get buildings that we can't maintain, or we don't know how to run, or we don't know how to maintain. And throughout the guide, we talk about the importance of information. You know, BIM is a journey that I can't stand up here and ignore. It's an important part of facilities management, and an important part of CIBSE's movement forward is that we need to share information better. And Guide M talks about that as well. We need to be economic, we need to deliver good buildings. You know, that last picture, you know, that's a real example of where we are getting design wrong, and what we want to do as a facilities management profession is tell our design teams how not to do it wrong. So just engage us a little bit earlier in the process, and we will talk about things that work for operators and owners, and we'll talk whole life, not just the operational, the capital phase. I mean, a big part of facilities management is about keeping everybody safe. You know, that is a disaster waiting to happen. You know, if we don't do our jobs properly, fires happen, drastic things. So our job, if you like, as maintainers, is to prevent that sort of thing happening. It's all about also about quality, so air quality, very important subject. And as we build more airtight buildings, we need to maintain that better. We've got quite a big task in facilities management. You know, we have to talk the same language as the boardroom, but we also have to understand what happens in the boiler room. You know, and it's as big as that job. You know, it's a big task to do, and we have to understand the language of both. And hopefully through the guide, we've given you the sort of language to use. Cost is massive. You know, you all know this, 20, 100, 10, whatever the ratios are. But, you know, it's about the operational phase. But what we've written in the guide is a whole chapters around economic life, and Andy will share that with you in a minute. But, you know, it's a big part of getting design right, is to think about the whole life of this building as you design it. And then, you know, there is no planet B. I have my energy guru in the room. We spent a lot of time on the energy chapter because we think it's a huge impact. Maintainers have the ability to maintain in a sustainable way, in an economic way, but also, you know, saving the energy, saving the planet. So we got on our high horse a little bit. But, you know, it's a good chapter, and I hope you'll all read it and use it. And then it's kind of my joke, really. You know, we need to evolve. We are maintainers, and we need to talk from the boiler room to the boardroom. But there are new technologies out there, and what we've done is try to convey that in the document as well, and tell you about the methodologies that you can use, and the changes in strategy, if you like. There's more there that can help you. We're also very passionate about competencies and the engineers that are doing maintenance, and we think we've written a chapter there that can help people understand how you could maintain your staff skills, and done a chapter on training. So sort of to sum it all up, when we started the process, I don't know, 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we had grand plans. You know, this is a guide. We were going to reorganise it to go through this cycle of plan, do, act, check, act. You know, these are the things you need to do to maintain a building. This was our dream. And actually, although we haven't managed to restructure the document in this way, every single one of those tasks that you need to plan what you need to do in maintenance, do maintenance, so it gives you the strategies. It talks about auditing and checking, and then it talks about how to improve your processes. So I hope you will all take a moment to read it. We've got a couple of more speakers to take you through some of the specific chapters, but hopefully that's a big enough overview. And my final point, if you like, is a massive thank you, because I couldn't have done it alone. It was a task. We had a very active steering group, and some peer reviewers that had some fantastic comments for us, and my editors that were so patient with me, and the CIBSE HQ team that, you know, they let us run on with it. You know, they could have stamped their feet and said, you know, get this guide out, but they waited for us because they knew what they were going to get at the end was the right product. So that's us, and I hope you enjoy the guide. Geoff.
All this planning and we're finally here. Good evening, everybody. I'm almost choked, really overwhelmed, not only with the turnout, but the fact that we've got it. Fantastic work by the editing team to get it to where it is now. So this, to me, is the start of the next journey, to get it out there, to get it embraced, not only in CIBSE, but in the industry as a whole. And I think part of that is the discussions we'll have over drinks and the discussions we'll have going forward over the next few months to really bring it to life in the industry and build on the success of the previous version. I did mainly Chapter 3. We'll touch on in terms of the thanks at the end. There's a number of the other co-authors here tonight, but obviously a few of us are just doing some of the salient chapters and points. I did Chapter 3 in terms of a number of areas we did try to rewrite, as Joe said, where we could bring so much. There was all stuff coming forward, so well, what about that? BIM's now coming in. How do we join that up? And you take opportunities, and we really have all worked together with the people across the industry, and there really is a coming together, not only to produce Guide M, but a joining up. And I know I won't apologise for my enthusiasm for it, but they're really for CIBSE industry, not just for maintainers, but for the industry as a whole. It is a fantastic opportunity, not just the Guide M, that's the catalyst, but where we are. We've gone through the dips of recession, energy's back in vogue. There's a controls conference with BSRIA next week. I stand up and say it's not just about energy, guys. It's end-to-end, it's management of risk, professionalising the whole thing. And what I'll say now is, I think, different to what Joe said in terms of, I said at the Soft Landings conference, the CIBSE conference recently, it's not just about handing over for the FM guys to make good maintenance. The real emphasis for me is influencing great designs. We're all here to make buildings work more effectively. So whether we're consultants, FMs, designers, supplier, manufacturers, from what David said tonight, is really key to bring all this together. So for me, we have a significant opportunity. And without a strategy, whether it's maintenance, whether it's your day-to-day business, the organisation you work, you probably talk to your board or talk to your team trying to motivate them, and say, well, without a strategy, you cannot have robust plans. So this chapter 3, is aimed at sort of conceptualising the strategy for maintenance, the options, because don't forget, people from BIFM, people are just coming in new to FM, consultants, lots of people just want to pick something up. As John said, that was a success of the previous documents. It was a go-to place to point you to other things, give you enough information to delve deeper where you needed to. So it builds on that. But not only in the previous document, generally, as I think you'll agree, there was various forms. Lots of my work over the last 20 to 30 years, when I did research and pushing ahead on maintenance and designs, people would say, well, we base it on our last 3 tenders. We use the old PSA schedules. Oh, well, SFG is all right, but it's paper copy. It's not really suits what we need. Well, as Mike has said, that's been rewritten. It's now electronics, much more adaptable, customisable for your own use. So we've now got much more of an improved approach. Before, there may be not, like I'm promoting, input into the design, the link to design, rather than just, that's what's being handed over, that's what's being commissioned, what's the best way to maintain it? Let's find some efficiencies and performance. We can now actually influence that design, not only through this document, but joining up with the other industry information. So there's now a defined overarching approach, which I don't believe there's been before. And I think that's the real success that we should take forward with this document and now put it into practice wherever we can. I think it will become best practice, used as a real guidance and quoted and real as a learning and as an influencing document. It's all there in this one approach. Like I said, it's the design through the operational life and the retrofitting. A consistency of approach, linking with these industry standards. So it's not just standalone, it's not just CIBSE's view, it's deliberately been done in collaboration with a lot of the other main players, industries, and input through practitioners. It's not just been people locked away doing what they think is the thing to do. Lots of many years of experience, both in terms of the commentary, the guidance, writing it, and making sure it fits with the other industries. A number of us have spoken, have supported the launch of some of the other documents I'm going to touch on. So it really has been joined up as a great opportunity to move things forward for the design and operations and maintenance industry. So I know Andy will touch on this. We're all now in a position, whereas before we said, well, we've benchmarked it, we use the PSA guide, we're a bit secretive about our information we've got. But there's some real data now, so opportunity to make informed decisions. Whether you're defending your existing maintenance budget, designing the building, and you're specifying a maintenance budget or a maintenance strategy, this document, and particularly the maintenance strategy section, really gives you the information to start building on that. So please take it away and use it. This document, we've put a block diagram in there. It shows where the guide sits, because not only, as I said before, where there's maintenance follow-on for effective management, soft landings, handover, it really is about making an active point with the information to influence, to make better building design, better commissioning, better involvement over the life cycle. So move through SFG 20, BS 854, which is the life cycle document, the RICS NRM3 document, which now tells you, you can't say, well, we've got our ideas, but we can't really cost it properly because it doesn't link up. We now have the suite of documents with Guide M overlaying that, and following on from Joe's point of from the past Plan, Do, Check, Act regime, to cycle that through refurbishment of buildings, change of use of a building. And the really important bit for FMs, apart from being involved in a design stage, is this phrase that I put together a few years ago, building operational risk management. It's not just the facilities manager managing the compliance, the operational risk management and the service, the customer post-occupancy evaluation. It's actually inputting the design. So you're considering building operational risk effectively as part of the design as well. So just some areas there, particularly about the chapter. It takes a few paragraphs, areas, it just gives people a flavour, some guidance, some key areas to look to build their maintenance strategy. The back part of the chapter gives an example of how you can actually implement a strategy based on some of the points, but good information whether you're new to it as a designer. Chapter 2, which Steve in the main wrote, actually gives some real good information for the designers. So I'm sorry guys, designers, there's no excuse anymore. You go to chapter 2 and that should tell you what you should be thinking about well before you sign it off, before you get to your final stages and you build it. There's a bit in there about each of the stages, the client's responsibility. Obviously you should have a maintenance policy, a maintenance strategy, types of delivery, usual in-house. Many of us have worked with this over many years, but for some people this is really refreshing. It tells them what their options are, whether they get a consultant involved to help with their maintenance, but gives them the sort of thing they need to form their own strategy and own their own strategy. But going back to what I've said before, we've now got a defined basis for tendering. So with SFG 20, it's flexible. You can prioritise your buildings, the little charts I've got in the side there. You can use your condition index, condition 1, 2 and 3. As an example in chapter 3 about categorising your buildings, A, B and C. Some people can say, well, we want to categorise them in 5. You've got to keep it simple, and the terminology about, what's statutory by law, what's recommended best regulatory practice, or in your sector. You may work in a sector that has certain things you need to do with your buildings and your services. And then there's the discretionary. And we're all fighting our budget, so the discretionary may well be energy. It's important, but against the priority, but you can make defined choices, gathering information, using the suite of documents across the industry to be in a much better position to have those discussions with your Chief Financial Officer and input into your new designs. And yes, going forward, we've mentioned it and Joe prefaced it in the start of the document, but now you've got these asset classifications that are linked to RICS, SFG 20. The design, effective design through BIM is great, but we can now say to the design team, this is what we want. There's some standard classifications, and you can start thinking about your maintenance strategy for your building and your life cycle operations. The tools are all there now. Thank you very much.
How do I follow that with the passionate words of Geoff? Very difficult. I've got to talk about compliance, legislation and operational risk. I started off on this venture with Joe and with John. Joe twisted my arm and said, would I mind doing a few slides and demonstrate the guide? So reluctantly, with a few Chinese burns, I got coerced into doing it. Then recently, Geoff grabs me by the hand and says, these have got to be suitable and sufficient. You've only got 3 slides and you've got 10 minutes. I think I've got about half an hour at the moment, Geoff. But I said, according to past history, it's foreseeable I'm going to overrun. That's just not good enough, Geoff said. Put some control measures in place and comply. So I've asked Joe to wave at me when I get to 9 minutes. And if anybody out there is doing buzzword bingo, you've probably got a straight line for all of that. Okay, here we go. We're going to start on. Am I going to get it work? What are we going to point at it? Right-click, that one. That one. There we go. Chapter 10 of the guide. I'm flicking right through now. So, it's about health and safety, it's about operational risk, and it's about assessing the risk. When we set about doing the guide, we used the health and safety guidelines as a model, and we've came up with identify the hazards, who you might cause harm to, and what the potential of losses might be incurred. Evaluate the risk and identify control measures. It's important when you go through in this stage, the risk you do within your business or what you reasonably expect. Don't go outside. Make sure that they are applicable to your business. You're not expected to anticipate unforeseeable risk. Record significant findings and review and update. Again, we used it, and as Joe pointed out, that follows the same Deming principle of plan, do, check, and act. Business risks. We identified when we were going through the revision, business risks were important to us. And the analysis of your risks aren't just totally associated with health and safety. Create yourself a risk register. The new part of the Guide M gives you an example as to how to start from it. Include finance within your risk register as a priority. When you take it from the boiler room to the boardroom, they'll start to understand a little bit more when you identify what appears to be a very small scenario to have a very large financial risk. It's inevitable that you're controlling your risks and you've got your resources and your processes in place at the moment. But it's extremely important that you check and you make sure that your control measures are in place and are functional. Operational risks, again, it's covered within the guide, and that's the encompassing process of managing the risks from the handover through the life cycle of the building and the disposal. It covers identification of high-risk activities, whether you're working on electricity, or high-risk areas, whether you've got confined spaces or large vats within your business. Legislation. As you can see, I've used the demonstration. It's a bit of a minefield. Within Chapter 15, we provide within the legislation in 15.2, it contains information about legislation which requires specific topics and specific tasks that are undertaken at specific intervals as part of the facilities management team and as part of the operation of a building. There's descriptions in there and there's an overview as to what they're about. Such tasks examples are fire safety risk assessments and auditing, water hygiene risk assessments, landlords' gas safeties, written schemes of examination. There's a brief overview as to what you expect when you're looking through and you're going through for them. If we'd have did it as a full document, it would have been a series of volumes, Guide M, so it's overview and it's topical. When we talked about records, I'd just like to add into a comment that there's 4 key terms to look for when you receive records from your suppliers. You're looking for comments about good repair. That could be a simple tick box to say it's looking well maintained. You're looking for a general term that it's in an efficient state. Your engineer's condition report can tell you that. It's working well, paint's still on it, no noisy bearings. And then you're looking for an efficient working order. And that's the engineer's report statement to say that operationally it's functional, it's doing its job, it's connected to the system as a whole. And emergency devices. If there's emergency devices fitted to it, there should be a statement to say that they're in correct operation and the emergency devices are functional. Now, they're not my terms. They're terms extracted from the provisional use workplace equipment regulations. They're in there. And they're the terms that should be used for your reports when you're looking for the information. Compliance table. Nice big pile. Lots of things. Compliance is an issue that's been within the FM industry and the operational management of buildings for quite a while. It's touched on within the guide, and there is a table identifying specific areas of legislation with a minimal requirement for competency to carry out the undertaking of that legislation. And I believe that's as an exceptional, as an extra download to the guide. It's not actually included within the guide. It's going to be downloadable externally to it. I'd like to move on now to competency. As I mentioned in the previous slide on 10, it's also included within section 15 and section 17. So what is competence? Not who is competent, what is competent? Competence, when considering competence, it's important to ensure that the requirements are in proportion to the risks associated with the hazard. Chartered engineer looking after PAT testing is probably a little bit over the top for it, but you're looking at people relevant to doing the job and relevant to doing the task. So, within the guide, we've used some external resources and training and skills you should be looking for to identify your competence, experience and knowledge, and other factors. Now, to me, in my position, other factors is the most important factor. I can actually get the first two on the bullet point slides from a person's CV. So paperwork-wise, I can read into them. It doesn't mean I understand the person. Other factors, you're looking for attributes that the person has and their ability to perform them in a task. So these are a communication to try and identify these factors when you're looking for somebody with regards to competence. The other factors can be attitude, perception to safety, physical ability. They can all affect somebody's competence. And the level that you're looking for, again, is proportional to the risk and the hazard that you're asking them to look after. So then, when you're doing this, the employment interview is the ideal process. And it'll cover you of all of your three topics, providing you follow your appraisal process, your interview and your employer's process. So the job description is as suitable and sufficient as you can get to appoint a person to carry a role out. They also counter that by accepting the job when they enter the company. Keep records of appointments. Again, your health and safety people, your employee, PR, HR people will do that. I'll put a comment up here. Gas safe register, REFCOM, NIC, FIA. Sorry, there's nobody here from there, is there by any chance? They're not definitions of competence. They're definitions of a company's accreditation to an industry body. Look for the person's ability to do the job associated with the high risk activity that you have within your building. An example I will give you is lifts. Lots of lift companies are part of LOLA. Lots of lift engineers are working within there. You need to make sure that the lift engineer's qualifications and competence is correct if lifts are a big risk to your business. Running data centers, fire alarm systems, the company will probably be FIA registered, but if the fire alarm engineer comes in, doesn't fully understand your building, he trips the fire alarm, you could have a full system shut down just on one activation. So when you do your analysis, back to slide 1, as to what really covers you for risks, look down to the small stuff. This one. And my closing comment for today is, if I can get the right button, I'd like to say, which is why the pussycat's looking at the big pelican. If you read and you go through it, it tells you in a summary about what I've just gone across for all of it. If you take that in context with the picture, it gives it the correct context. It's risk assess. It will identify you your hazards and it will help you operate your business and minimise your risk. I'd like to finish now. Thank you very much for your hospitality. I'm going to pass across to Andy Green, who's going to talk about life cycle planning. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's been mentioned by 2 or 3 of the speakers. This document is really the result of a fantastic sort of cross-industry collaboration. I'm going to tell you a bit about Chapter 12, which is the life cycle section. And I want to actually just amplify on that theme, because this really is a significant document, and I'm going to really give you a bit more of an illustration as to why. In order to do the relifing tables, this actually has taken an enormous amount of effort from working with BNES and the RICS and BCS, which are the Cost Advisory Service. They've actually changed their standards to come in line to link the maintenance to the renewal back to the construction, and CIBSE Guide M is probably the only document that brings all of those strands together. So Chapter 12 is really important in terms of making sure there's a common structure for every service asset. What is the right maintenance to be done? What is the appropriate life? And how that actually is all linked together with obviously BIM coming along very shortly. So I'm going to just spend a little bit of time just showing you an illustration of how that was evolved, how that then has been developed into the tables, and more importantly, why that is really the most significant issue for the industry. Life-in, as the indicative life of all these services assets, we've now got over 25 pages which covers every single asset type, including breaking it down into its detailed specification. In addition to that, factors are being recommended in the document to actually tailor it to suit the circumstances it's operating in. You can imagine a 24/7 hospital, things are going to be performed differently than an office which is 9 to 5:30, or an operation that's near the coast where there's lots of salt air and other environmental issues. So the document covers all the factors you should take into account to localise the life-in of assets in the appropriate way. And that's really, really useful information. In the planning of this exercise, we needed to make sure that this document is comprehensive. So as you can see on the illustration here, an example of just the boiler, we've got actually a list of almost 1,200 items which have been lifed that link back to the constructed asset and also link through to the SFG maintenance. So in the total maintenance perspective, we're building it, we're maintaining it, and we're appropriately life-in and renewing it. For the first time, there's a linking up of the whole structure. And with CIBSE's committee, collaboration with other professions and BNES, this has now all come together. So this document is actually almost like the final piece of the jigsaw to bring this all into play. And the BNES have expanded their list of assets from what were the electrical, heating and the other elements to also bring in the fabric elements as well. So there's now an ability to bring every maintainable asset alongside the respective life cycle element as well. So in section 12, there's a table which is slightly presented differently in the actual published guide. And here's an extract, for example, the sanitary appliances. And on the left-hand side is a list of all the different items you could build and actually have in an operational mode. The respective life, which varies depending upon the construction type, is it a cast iron or vitreous china, gives a different life. It's linked then to the SFG code on the right-hand side. It's linked to the rules of measurement in terms of the description and coding. And that times all the other building services element creates Chapter 12, which really for the first time gives you every single asset that needs to be maintained and lived is covered. It's a really, really important, and the classification and coding. For those of you who are struggling with making BIM work, this is really, really important to help to do BIM in a more practical and standardised way. To reinforce that point, you've probably seen this diagram of the ability to link the BIM in FM back into the BIM in projects. And this classic case of CapEx, OpEx. Well, the life cycle side of this is really, really important for constructing and renewing assets, as well as how we build the operate, maintain and replace and the costs associated with those. So there's now a real opportunity to make a difference in terms of standardising how we set up and operate, maintain, how we run our buildings, how we unlock the knowledge from actually taking the information from what it costs to maintain and operate a building, and how that can be fed back into projects. Everybody is keen to do this. With Guide M, we've now got the tools to make that a possibility. And therefore, it's not a too difficult box. This is now, I think, because of the publication today, an opportunity that we can all embrace and take forward. Now, I understand that the document is going to be available in soft copy. I think that's really important as well, to be able to use this and apply it to particular projects and pick and mix the relevant parts. So making this easy to use is also part of what I think is brought out by the Guide M. So that's just a very quick canter in terms of the life cycle. It's been a privilege working not just with the committee and the long conversation we've had about life in lots and lots of different assets, but also the knowledge that that's harvested. Phenomenal amount of knowledge has gone into providing those documents. And the ability to make them usable, I think, is where we're at the start of an opportunity here, not at the end of producing the update to Guide M. So I recommend that we really take advantage of this, and I'm sure the more that this is put into practice, that BIM will become a norm rather than an aspiration that we're still trying to make work. So thank you for listening, and that's where I was coming from.
Right, so now you have an opportunity to grill us. Can I ask all the main speakers to come up? Andy, Steve, Geoff. I'll probably stand up, it's easier for me. So the question, does anyone have any burning questions for us? We've spent 2 years of our life living with this document. There must be a question. We are. Does anybody have a question for us? Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Geoff.
Have you taken into account the problems with installation? Because in my experience as an FM person, there are issues with design, but a lot of the problems come from value engineering by contractors to get rid of those costs, which then result in not very good kits with no access to it and real problems.
Still going out in the webinar.
To capture that question, I'll try and paraphrase it because we're webinaring. Tell me if I get it wrong. So the question is whether we have captured in the guide how important it is to get the design right so that we don't make errors and make it unmaintainable or difficult or impact on the operation. I think, Geoff, that's your chapter.
That wasn't the question. The question was whether you've taken into account the problems we get with installation, which is generally post-design, where it gets value engineered and you end up with a load of not very good kit without the right access, and everything's been slammed in, so you have to climb over one bit of kit to get to the next.
Yeah, no, so that is the question. That is covered in Geoff's.
Right, tonight, Matthew, anyway, I'll start that off. Yes, specifically, and as Joe said, in a range of the chapters, particularly Steve Gathergood, who drove chapter 2, as I mentioned in my pitch, particularly about information for designers, the bit in terms of maintenance strategy, the bit in terms of operations and maintenance commissioning chapter, it's there. I mean, yeah, anecdotally, we could all mention a specific thing. I run regular sessions on horrific stories and where we could have done it better afterwards. But in terms of guidance for the guide, I think we're quite satisfied that we've covered a lot of those areas and give people the opportunity. You know, we've all got the value engineering stories. And again, it's about Steve's point about skills, you know, installation skills, operations and maintenance expertise in a design team, challenge the design, you know, it's healthy. I know Joe's probably going to say as part of the summary, you know, challenge this in the next couple of years. You know, you may want to be on the committee for the next version, but, you know, there will be bits. The idea is to continually improve it. But I think we're quite satisfied. We've covered really as much as we can about this end-to-end process, not just the maintenance function.
Just on my part, it's partially covered within there. Value engineering is something that's very difficult to get onto. On my side, when you take it over, it would instantly go in your risk management plan, and it would be highlighted very early, and that would go back to the designers and the people. We as a group, we're trying to actively be involved with pre-design and get involved with buildings before they come online. So there's a passion, we're heading for that route.
Yeah.
We appreciate how difficult it is to do.
And the guide does refer to movements within the industry around government soft landings, BIM. They're all there. They're processes that will help us.
It'll guide you to references and tools that will help you, but we can't guarantee that this document will stop it.
Just got to read it. Brilliant. Any other questions? On my other side.
Livening up.
It's because of the webinar.
Hi, have you discussed closed protocol systems at design in your guide and the frustrations that may have for building maintainers?
Closed protocol, you mean?
Systems where you are stuck with one, well, the supplier you are stuck with throughout the life cycle of the...
Oh, okay, all right. I guess it's covered in the life cycle chapter where we're talking about the whole life and doing design, considering whole life.
I think in truth, that area we haven't gone as big on as we should have done. It's a reality in terms of procurement and depending on the form of contract, which is Chapter 11. But we're actually setting out the appropriate way of picking the right procurement, but where situations like that occurs, it tends to constrain. And in that constraint, then how do you make the best of that? But in truth, we probably haven't gone as deep as your question.
I suppose the chapters that will be relevant at that point are the auditing and making sure you've audited and monitored that element of maintenance that you're getting delivered. So it's giving you the skills, the questions to ask for that.
Closed protocols are a difficult one to deal with, and I've inherited a building where straight from design you end up with a BMS that's got one person in the UK, and the value engineering that the ladies mentioned over there was part of it, and you can't do anything about it. It's been built into the infrastructure. It's very difficult. I think we understand it's there, it's just wasn't the high topic on the list that we went through.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for your question. Any others? Sorry, another one this side.
Hi, I'd just like to, first of all, congratulate you on an excellent job. I know at my cost how much this sort of thing really takes. Fantastic team, you've done really well. And it's come a huge way since, the early 90s. But what do you feel we might develop this into one day? Do you feel there's a need to move to minimum standards in the form of possibly a code of practice rather than guidance in future?
We've got a lawyer that wants to take that question anyway.
Well, guidance tells you could do it like this, you could do it like that.
Absolutely.
Minimum code of practice minimum standards actually says thou shalt do this as a minimum, and this maybe as best practice. And so that's really putting in underpinning standards, which this hasn't quite got to. Maybe that's the next step, is it? I don't know. I'm just looking for comment.
You want to say that one first?
I think in part there are minimum standards. The legislation and compliance side of it is very much around compliance. That's the title of the chapter. I think we're also, from the work that's been going on with BNES, actually being very clearer about what keep out of jail maintenance looks like.
Yeah.
That's fundamentally sort of embedded in the what's coming out through Guide M and through the BNES initiative. But budgets are always going to be an issue. People will, fragmented in the way in which maintenance is let and procured. So there are a number of things working against that. But mandating, that's very hard. I think with BIM coming and the need to share data and what has to be done and what choices is where this is sort of probably going to be evolved to. But compliance, I think, is a start. but people actually being able to apply that in practice is also a barrier we've got to overcome, and I think Guide M helps you along that way.
On my side, I'd love to do what you've said. It would probably be a passion to me. BENS have got close to what they're doing as with it. However, the owner of the asset has an option of do nothing and leave it and take the risk and decide whether they're going to go to court or not and run on minimal finance expenditure. You can go across the other side, and I've heard it called Gould, I've heard it called Platinum, I've heard it called different types, and you maintain everything that's got anything to do with the building. And you've got any position in between of that bipolar situation. Don't comply, over comply.
In every chapter, it's all fully referenced, and not only what we've done as a team, the editing team have done a fantastic job, plus the peer review. So where we're saying about practice and choices and making people available what good practice is and what some of the issues are, all the portfolios, all the organisations are different. But it's referenced right the way through for British standards and appropriate codes of practice, which are the minimum standards where they exist for fire alarms, and not just the legislation stuff.
One of the sections within there, which I think is Guide 2, which is the strategy side that Geoff was on about, it cites about 12 or 14 different types of maintenance you can use. And it isn't a case of one system fits all. You can mix and model, change the shape of your jigsaw. It's all quite variable.
Thank you. I would just like to gently remind people that the Guide M is now here. It's a reality. I think the next stage is to actually reflect back to the building owners or the developers what that's going to cost them if they don't implement it further in their next project. And I think this is where we need to sell it, because until that happens, we will always end up with the difficulty of a job that you walk into and it's not maintainable.
Yeah.
And you're going to waste energy. And I think the information that's going to come out of this being used in existing buildings, we have to gather and we have to use that as a tool to say how much it costs you to have this sort of stupid building when you can have this sort of intelligent,
get some
good
examples
building.
out there. Very good idea.
I mean, picking up on Mike's point, I think there's a very important aspect that the business case to the client is going to win the day. I mean, everybody universally has to keep out of jail, but doing maintenance from a business point of view, keeping a shop open so it's trading, keeping a hospital so you're doing the right thing, that's what's going to drive the strategy, and that's when it's going to become embedded. If you try and just usually read the guide and its chapter says you should do it, if the business case is solid, the maintenance, you'll win the argument. And that comes out in the strategy piece, but we should play more on the clients need to lead the way on this if they're to really take advantage of some of the good things that are there.
I mean, a lot of it's not in the public, but through what we're doing and through working with people who've been either directly or indirectly involved with this, there's lots of good practice going on. You know, we've pulled, this is not all new stuff, we've pulled together our own experiences. It's been tested and people have challenged it and said, oh, I like that, or we used to do that at certain companies. But now, as I've said, there's much more of an open, joined up approach that people can recognise, and it is being implemented in a lot of areas, and I think you'll hear a lot more of success stories in the next couple of years where people will say, yeah, well, why aren't we doing that? People will move between companies, people will realise it's marketing edge. You know, the critical services area is very well defined, but there's different tiers where people have thought this is good for our business, we can be better than our other people by skilling our people up, getting the right people, paying them appropriately, using best practice, continual improvement, using systems to monitor condition. You know, people will really wake up to it. And for me, the buzz is the influence on the design. So we all design and make and operate buildings that work effectively. The energy a bit will come with it. You know, this is the fantastic opportunity.
We kind of see this guide as something that you would dip into and out of as and when you needed to know about that subject. So, you know, all the chapters are written with a very clear title of what that chapter's aimed at, what information it's going to give you in that chapter. So it's very much a Bible, if you like. So it sits at the side of your FM desk, and you can dip in, dip out of it when you have those issues to think about.
That's the specific bit of the title. Maintenance, engineering and management, as John alluded to. It's the management, it's not just the technical expertise, it's the management of maintenance through the life cycle of the building. So you're making considerations before you've even completed the design, let alone handed it over.
Another question?
Why do you feel there's a reticence to adopt BIM? I was just at the CIBSE conference last Friday and we had 3 very good speakers talking up for BIM and talking about how cost effective it was, getting the operations all turning up at the right times and saying they're winning business because they have adopted it. What's the feeling here in terms of, is it going to be fully adopted or are we seeing more people using BIM?
Can I take that one?
What time's drinks?
Let me do that. I was involved in writing PAS 1192 Part 3, which is the operational phase of BIM, and I'm passionate that facilities managers and operators of building need to get their house in order now, and get their information in order now, using PAS 1192 Part 3 as a guide, because then you'll be ready for the next phase. So if you do have an event or a trigger that they call it in 1192, is you can get that information through in an appropriate way for the information that you need for your business, because Part 3 is all about understanding what your organisation needs from information, and maintenance have control of all that information. It's just how we present that to the organisation. So it's about having that information at hand, and I think we all need to get on and do that. And the Life In will help you. The structure that we've given the data, that will help you. We're doing our best to give you the tools. Now you just need to go out and do them. We definitely pick it up, move it forward.
Just to really elaborate on what I probably should have covered more deep in my talk, an asset register that's standardised, that actually is handed over and put into the CDM files, that's really usable, that links to the relevant SFG, that's been appropriately applied through a strategy. That's just common sense. It's BIM in FM, simply put. And if you extract the information from that in cost or the work around the air handling unit and pass it back to the construction for the next cycle, you're doing BIM. I think the difference is people have different views on what BIM stands for. Yeah. It's exchanging information about designing buildings that are sustainable and operate and that fit for function. And I think this is just, again, one of the enablers to get you there.
Seems like a good product.
I think, I wouldn't say matured, but BIM's, I always joke, you could go to a BIM event 4 nights a week, and some people do. But it's really information management, and a couple of us spoke at the RIBA event a few weeks ago, and yes, the new plan of work is great because it focuses operations and input into design, and it's still only the small bits at the end. Soft landings, the government soft landings. It should be a process rather than just be a handover, sort of over we go, it's handed over now. It should be a transition period. That's more my thinking than perhaps some of the guidance. But for me, the BIM bit is still, we still talk about that gap. We talk about effective construction, design, effective, and some of the more mature guys will say, well, we've been doing clash detection for 40 years, you've just got a computer that does it faster. There's some drive by some of the software providers, to obviously because it's business. Some of the larger design consultants are rightly, CIBSE are doing some great pieces of work. Not only, I'd recommend you to go on BIM Talk, which is done with RICS or RBA, and they're leading, obviously supporting construction in the council, all the other areas that address him. I'm involved, aside from as the CIBSE representative, on BIM for FM, where we've got all the institutions interested in BIM joined up to try and says how would it work, and but there's still this gap about, well, it's effective design, it's BIM, then it's in use. What we're saying, as Andy said there, you've got the structure of the assets now, because the CAPM providers all sell you their versions, a way to code it, and a different service provider will come and says, but we need to resurvey your building. And the surveyors among you will say, yeah, we'll survey all your buildings, 200 buildings, yes, we'll do that. What we're promoting is the opportunity to say, that's the data structure that not only fits in with your standard assets, but gives you the opportunity to either develop and tweak your maintenance strategy. So back to this building information management rather than modelling. It's not just the 3D stuff, but you all know that. I can talk all day on BIM, don't start me.
There's another question.
Good evening. I just had a question really around one of the buzzwords we're bumping into a lot in the FM industry, and that's agile working. And as an engineer, that means to me continuous change of use of the buildings and the properties we deal with on a cycle. If we get 3 years of the same use, we've done well, and yet we're dealing with buildings typically designed with one use in mind.
Anybody want to take that first? No. Okay, sorry. I think you're really pushed him maybe into the, whilst there's still confusion to say, well, I'm a strategic FM player, I've got 4 mail rooms and a security room, and I look after workplace management. We're, and I think the fantastic opportunity that CIBSE continues to have is proper custodians of the assets, the building services, the design, the operations. And I think what we've tried to do here, I mean, we haven't, and I wouldn't have thought we should have had a flexible working equipment. It's the policy, the processes, the IT. But if the main infrastructure of what the building is designed to, whether it's speculative or whether it's a purpose-built shopping centre or data centre, if we're getting that right and putting the main strategy, the ideas, the best practice together on that I think steers more into perhaps the BIFM and the Building Futures Group area. That's just the view from, response to your question. I don't know if anybody else has got, it'd be nice to get some good experience of agile working that works. A lot of people are, like BIM, claiming to do it, but then they'll go back to the desk and where they used to work before it was implemented. But this is really about the infrastructure, the building, and to make the building flexible. Going back to the other point, there's a good section on controls as well. No, we're not saying this is a document because CIBSE has its own controls guide as well. But so we've really tried to dip in and give people, FMs, designers, owners and operators, a real sort of palette of stuff to look at to move forward with.
Yeah. The controls was written from scratch. It moved on so much since the last edition that we had to start again from that one. So that's a real rewrite. Any other questions? Okay. We are finishing 10 minutes early, so congratulations to you all.